Everybody, welcome to After Church Tea Time. We're kind of sorry for the live delay. Um, Daylight savings hasn't happened in Europe yet, so we had a bit of I had a bit of a technical issue. Today we are talking about some historical moves happening in France actually, and daylight our world today. After church tea time, I said that. Okay, our world today. I'm so sorry. Welcome to our world today. I probably say it's after church tea time. I don't know why. Um, yeah, we're talking about the news that we felt were relevant during the week, and yeah, we are discussing something that happened that was pretty historic in France. Last week, which was um, making abortion, I guess IVF, constitutional rights, basically. And yeah, that was a decision that was several months in the making, and I think it's pretty important. The discussion for it, like the final discussion for it, kind of started right as we were talking about the effects of Roe being overturned in the US, which I thought was kind of, in a sinister way, interesting to compare. I It was very soon and I didn't know like how far the bill was going to go at that moment. But now that it's passed, I guess we can kind of discuss it. And so basically the two parliament houses of France have decided to make the right to contraception and anything about the around the legal conception of life um, into the Constitution, which is pretty historic, I would say. I don't think there is any country that is doing that at this moment. And I think as a French person, it's pretty important for me to see that aside from the amendments of the text that I studied in school and in university in social sciences, most of which dates from the 19th century. There is now like an amendment that is basically, I think it's the first amendment in like 50 years easily, and that is basically totally based on the protection of the body and the protection of conception and protection of health, especially for people that conceive, basically, and women, So yeah, I want to know. I feel a huge like breath of relief on my side as I speak about it. And I'm just curious to know, like, if you guys have any insights or way you're seeing this from the outside, maybe some more measured way to look at it, because obviously it's very subjective for me. And see if like anyone watching us also has things that they want to say about this. I'm interested. So yeah.
I just feel it was a monumental win for France. And looking at the celebration that everyone was going through when the Constitution had announced this was very emotional in a good way to recognize how liberating it is. And I believe it was like 700 and something votes for it and like 70 against it. So it was like completely unanimous that France was standing up for women's rights and France was showing that women are equal and women have the right to decide what they want to do with their body. And going to America and seeing how it was completely turned over, that um, abortion is not allowed in certain states, it showed that like where we are and where we wish to manifest, in certain rights and certain environments. Because I feel like America thinks that it's not easy to come about this, um, and for everyone to feel disliberated. But as France has shown, it is peaceful, and it can be easy, and can be a very joyous occasion to bring equality.
Yeah, it feels like at the core, like it's a choice of commitment, committing to human rights and committing to autonomy. And yeah, I love your point that you were making, Nadia, that it's as we can see from France, like it's not hard to do, right? It's something that can be done, and it just takes the choice. Um, and shows like what are you valuing, what are you valuing autonomy, what are you valuing, and France made that choice to show that they do value that.
Yeah. And also, one thing that is standing out to me too is like how France has chosen to legalize abortion, like through the years, because in like abortion, I think abortion was first legalized in France in 1975, based on the reading we've been doing. So that's interesting because that's around the time Roe versus Wade, the original U.S. court decision that legalized abortion in the U.S. came down. So, but to my understanding, that wasn't a Supreme Court ruling in France. That was just a law, right? That was just a national law that was passed by the legislature.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's interesting because it shows that it's, I feel like it shows in general more overall, like more popular support for that like bodily autonomy, you know, for women, because it's a lot easier to overturn a law made by a legislature generally than it is to change a Supreme Court ruling, because, like a vote could be held at any time in a session, like after the law has been like implemented. Whereas like with the Supreme Court, at least in the US, like with the Supreme Court, our justices are appointed by the president. They serve for life or until they want to retire. So a court's ideological viewpoints are going to be, I think maybe the intention was that they're like more stable and less influenced by like, oh, this party's in office, that party's in office, right? So, but so for us, it was like um, the court at the time just happened to, not just happened to, but there was the right moment came where the Supreme Court was ideologically aligned with allowing abortion. And then that ruling could literally stay in place for 50 years, even if there was a lot of controversy about abortion in the US, because they simply couldn't get different justices into the Supreme Court to change it. But as soon as the opportunity presented itself, there were some new appointees put in the U.S. Supreme Court, and then they had a majority who disagreed with Roe versus Wade, so they could overturn it. So it seemed like the support for it was more unstable in the U.S. Than in France. So I don't know. That was my feeling about it, but I don't know if that's. But
That's
it's like two different
interesting.
ways to approach it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I would say I think you're right. I've never looked at it that way. I think Roe versus Wade was either like 1 year before or 1 year after um the legalization of both IVF and abortion in France. Um legalization that was made by politician and women's rights activist Simone Weil, who was very respected. She's deemed as a national hero now. Like she was at her death, like she was celebrated at the Invalid, which is basically like where it's kind of the capital. It's like where the important political figures of the nation are just political and social figures of the nations are just they just rest after their death. And there was something like there was definitely debate here. Like it's not perfect. We don't have as much facilitation of people conceiving children as there is in the US. Like we don't have like surrogate mothers. Like this is illegal here, and even like IVF was in discussion for a while. Like should we go back? Like maybe like far right discussions were like should we go back on this? Like this is not ethical and things like that. But for abortion and then for IVF, it was so short-lived that it was almost a non-debate here. And there is also this thing of like this year, this has surprised me because I started to really listen to a new government of ministers that we have right now in France, and everyone seems to agree on two things, like abortion. Probably like for the older politician men, because they know that they won't be able to counter it. So, and they listen to the movement and the direction that the country is going in. And also climate change, surprisingly. There's going to be a big debate this summer about like how we're going to unanimously work on this. And a lot of people seem to agree on some base rules to make our lives easier. And it's making me feel like, with you guys talking about how it seems to feel so difficult in the US, I feel like there is something of like they value what the people are saying. They take into account for all our protesting and the things that we do wrong. I would say that at least like the parliament has really taken into account the consciousness of a country, like what people actually really desire, and they didn't waste time in enshrining it anymore. So I think this is pretty positive. This is a good example of like I guess what we wished would have happened at the Supreme Court like a few years ago when Roe was overturned. And I remember like we made a blog about that on the Church of Union website, and it was basically about like when Jeff wrote that, and he said like when the Supreme Court or like the leaders don't listen to the voice of the country, like it has like devastating results. And I'm happy to see that what we're witnessing today is like kind of like the contrary. It's like the ideal thing. Like lots of political parties they don't agree on a lot of things, but on what matters, they seem to find ground and move forward, which feels good. And yeah.
So yeah, I definitely agree that it feels good that the right to abortion, so technically the right to self-determination of whether to conceive has become a constitutional right. I feel like on one level they've won, but then on another level there is something that's lacking where surrogacy then is not legal in France. So it's like it's almost still like this almost internal struggle, like that complex human being struggling with certain parts of accepting themselves and not certain parts of and not accepting other parts of themselves. So there is still a bit of a caveat there. I also believe that the AP News article that you shared around France making abortion a constitutional right. Also, for me, kind of watered down the spirit of celebration by highlighting that there's still so many challenges that women and girls face in so many countries around the world. And so this is not per se a cause for celebration. And I think it just kind of left a little bit of a bitter taste to the flavor of the article, because I feel like it is a significant celebration in that when something becomes a constitutional right, it's so much more complicated to have a constitution overturned as opposed to a legal ruling. And the fact that it's been enshrined in the Constitution makes it so that you're gonna have to be seriously influential across many spheres to change that kind of thing. So it definitely speaks to a level of women owning their power, their personal power in France. And that's why, by extension, their reality has shifted in this way. But there's still, given that it's all related to International Women's Day, there's obviously still a part of me that goes, well, how much has changed in the grander scheme of things if we feel into the fuller collective energy, where France is still very much a country that is gender segregated in terms of certain jobs and things like that. There are still disparities of income across jobs, where women in essence earn less than men on their salaries and their pensions and those kind of things. So yes, great stride in progress, but still a lot further to go.
Well, I mean, I feel like that. I feel like what feels best, at least to me, is to really focus on this victory, like how big of a victory it is, though, because yeah, like the journey of a country is analogous to the journey of a person, and so I feel like on all of our journeys, when we're making good progress, we focus on that, and then we properly recognize that, and then we move on to the next step in front of us. Like, what's the next challenge for us to conquer, whatever. But we don't, we don't conquer a challenge and then be like, yeah, but look at all these other obvious problems in my life. I feel like I totally get what you're saying, though. I completely get what you're saying, that yes, there are other challenges to women's rights in France and around the world, but I think it's a big deal, especially when the first country finally does a certain thing. It's a big deal. Like when you look back at the history of gay marriage, same-sex marriage rights, like it was a big deal when I think the Netherlands, was the first country to legalize same-sex marriage. So, and then so many other countries followed, and it was good. It was a big step. And so, I don't know. I feel like that's a good
Yeah, it
thing.
was like similarly to Sage, I would say. And I did say it like for all that it's worth, for all that we disagree on, and for all the wrongs that we have, I would say that it was good that we marched in a really united way towards the broadening of women's rights and climate change afterwards, like this summer. And I was feeling exactly the same as Sage, to be honest. It was like, this is 50 years in the making, so it is a good step. And it's like kind of like on my personal journey, I would say, hey, today I did something that I didn't know I could do before. Like it was a success. Like I gained something, I healed something, I got promoted and things like that. And I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, but I'm still not at the level of success that I wish I could be, I'm just like, yeah, okay, for today it was good, and then I continue the work. Like obviously the work is definitely not done. We have a lot of problems for sure. I think French people are definitely not forgetting that there is like still a lot of work to do. But it really does feel like a victory still, and it's like kind of this energy of chop wood, carry water, and sometimes like 4 days stop and celebrate, and then you go back to work. And I think that's definitely the vibe that I was picking up on. But I do agree that there is so much more to do. But hopefully, like this, it's kind of like these little steps that leads the way forward for a lot of progress. I would say nationally and also internationally, hopefully. So yeah, looking forward to how really like it's truly a social impact, like how this will impact the country itself and how this will impact like other people in terms of like women's rights.
So I think you guys didn't get my just. My just was that there was a celebration element to the article, but there was also a non-celebration just to the article that kind of overshadowed the celebration just to the article. So that was not necessarily my view. It was just that I didn't feel the article gave the celebration the attention it deserved.
Oh, sorry.
Also, yeah,
I don't know
no
why.
problem. Also, we have a comment from one of our followers that's made a comment. So I just want to share it with you and see how you guys feel about this. So she says, it doesn't feel good to legalize killing innocent babies in the womb. A choice was made to bring that baby to life the moment it was conceived. God willed that a baby to be. And no one has the right to take away the baby's right to be alive. My twin flame's mother was an orphan baby, and if at her time this was an option for her mother and she chose for it for whatever reason, my twin flame wouldn't be here on earth. So I think like just initially, my initial feeling, I would say that yes, there may have been situations that could have influenced the existence or non-existence of your twin flame, but I also feel like your twin flame made the choice to be alive. It's not that the circumstances are outside of your twin flame's choice. So even so the mother may or may not have had the option, but the child would have been born irregardless if it was born to that mother or another mother, if that was the choice of that soul.
Yeah. So that brings back the power of individual choices when it comes back to it. And some babies do choose to, grow in the womb and then be like, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to go back. And then I'll come back another way or another time. So it really gives one personal power and autonomy.
Yeah, I thought, thank you for your comment, Sarah. I think it was very interesting that you voiced it in that way. I would say yes, like abortion is not to be treated lightly, obviously. This is a very sensitive choice, and I don't think anyone that goes for an abortion would say that they leave without feeling something about it. I think it's not about that. It's more so about making sure that your choices as a mother as well, because the baby makes the choice to incarnate on earth. So it's more of a spiritual choice than a physical choice, which I agree with Granville. But the mother also has a choice to put herself to safety, either like physically or financially, which means that when you don't necessarily have the means to welcome a baby in the right way, which can be very painful, and an unwanted child can be very painful as well and traumatizing for a baby. It may be a solution that is, yes, painful, but less so than a family that would suffer afterwards, and also for health reasons. So when you legalize that, you allow people with true problems, health problems that have been diagnosed or are undiagnosed, which we know, like women, there's still a long ways to go about women's health and discoveries of prenatal disease and things like that. So it is a way to make sure that there is also safety for all. So it's not a choice to be made lightly, for sure, but it's also not a choice to be made lightly in order to preserve like the family's health, I would say. And I would invite you, Jeff and Shaleia in 2020 did a very, very good job at explaining the complex intricacies of abortion and legalizing abortion or not. So we'll link that to you when the live is over so that you can kind of understand like where we're coming from with this discussion. And then like we can also feel free to, still comment, and we'll talk about like where we're coming from also in this discussion, because we've had a lot of discussions on abortion as well. But yeah.
Mhm. And I wanted to extend that and say that all life is eternal. So when you are going through that decision to come to Earth and recognize that this may not be the best situation for you and your baby, you have that self love within yourself to give that baby the best life that they can give. And with safe procedures that allows you to be safe. And say, like last episode, we talked about a pregnancy that could have been really dangerous for a mother. If she was able to abort her baby, then that would have been very good for her health. And then there's examples of people who go through sexual assault and abuse and would like to not go through the trauma of giving birth to a baby that they didn't quite decide on. So these are all the decisions that one would be able to make if they were able to have a very solid, law-abiding abortion is, able to be done if they were living in a society that abortion was legal.
And I agree with you, and I think I do want to stress the right to self-determination, because I feel like we lose sight of the fact that your choice is sacrosanct, so and to take away the right to choose almost takes away the right to your humanity on a level. And so it's easy for us to provide an opinion either or, but the fact of the matter is what score to your humanity, and how much does that influence how you feel within yourself, but also how you engage with the world. And we also need to remember that even though certain things may not have been, you may not think that you have made a choice in certain instances. We've always made a choice. We've made a choice to experience a learning from a soul lesson. We may not have always been clear about how that soul lesson presents itself. And I think that also allows us to learn how to choose not to learn through contrast.
Yeah, I would say definitely everything is a lesson in life, but you have to allow yourself to go through the lessons that you need. And sometimes, it feels like the best decision is not to sacrifice yourself for others. There is also like the choice of the mother. I would say self-determination. You're right about that. The choice of the mother is very important and easily forgotten or silenced in these discussions when we say that people have rights to this, people have choice to this, people don't have choice to that, you know. And like the most important person is like the carrier of the baby and their safety. And yeah, I want to transition to a topic, and it's funny because we chose this topic before we chose the one in France, and it's a topic that is very related. And we're going to a country that has been a leader in women's rights for the past few years. It will be very interesting to talk about that, and it's Ireland. And I want Isaiah and Sage to talk a little bit about what's going on in Ireland in terms of women's rights right now, but it's interesting for us to discuss.
Yeah, so Ireland, basically, we're talking about a vote recently in Ireland. So it was a national referendum, and it was a referendum on whether or not they should make two constitutional amendments, the 39th and the 40th amendments to the Irish Constitution. And so these were about women's rights, essentially, and like defining women's place in society, or leaving women open to kind of, you know, choose the role that they desire in society, basically. And so these get a little bit technical, but I think this story shows that the details really matter, you know, like when you're making a law and everything like that. So there were two amendments proposed. The 39th Amendment was referred to as the Family Amendment, about like the definition of a family. And then the 40th would be the Care Amendment. So it would be about changing how, like, what the kind of expectations are for women to care for their families versus for the state to care for families. So the Family Amendment was basically saying that a family is not defined by a marriage. So it used to, currently in the Irish Constitution, you're not considered a family unless you are a married couple with or without children. And the amendment was going to be a family can be based on a marriage or any other durable relationship. So that's kind of where the issue was, because people were wondering what counts as a durable relationship, you know, like, am I going to be allowed family benefits one day and then sometime later not be allowed family benefits because my relationship isn't judged to be durable or something like that. So that was an issue that people had. And so that was the first amendment change. And I guess the relevance of that would be like any government laws having to do with like the state supporting families or giving constitutional rights to families would be affected by that. Because now, if the amendment were passed, that would be expanded basically to more people. And the Care Amendment was basically saying that it was, so right now in the Irish Constitution, it says that women provide services, or like, what's the exact word? Support. Women provide support to the state by supporting their families, and that it is specifically, it says it's a woman's role, basically. It doesn't say it's only a woman's role, but it only mentions women, saying that they provide irreplaceable care to their families, you know. And the other part of it was saying that women the state needs to make sure that women wouldn't be obliged by economic necessity to neglect their duties in the home. So basically that it's saying, hey, government, make sure that a woman doesn't have to leave her role in childcare and the home just because she needs to work to provide for the family. So that's currently in the Irish Constitution.
both of these were voted down, right?
Yeah, but
Or not
both
voted for.
right. So both of the changes were voted down by a big margin, actually, 69 and 73%. So yeah, and then the issue with the CARE amendment, like the change to it, was that they changed it so that basically they said the members of the family, not just the woman, the members of the family provide support to each other that that is necessary for the common good, and that the state shall strive to support um, the family. And so that was an issue people had, because people were like, wait a minute, so the state only has to strive to support families? Like, does that mean that like the state could be like, oh, we strived to support you, but like it turns out we couldn't? Sorry. Like that would give a constitutional like backdoor from state giving aid to like needy families or whatever in a tough situation. So yeah, so people voted it down by a lot. But this story, I feel like this story isn't a clear cut, like, it shouldn't be interpreted as, oh, this was a loss for these people or a win for these people. A lot of articles I saw were trying to make it seem like that. I feel like it's more a lesson in like, we need to, you need to be really clear when you make a new choice. What is your new choice? And like you said, Ireland has been big on supporting women's rights and other things too, like even the right to abortion and same-sex marriage. But maybe these amendments weren't designed properly. So yeah.
Nada, did you want to say something?
It just feels off to me that they would have a definition of a loving relationship, and put that into like boxes and say that, oh, well, you are providing for your family, so you are doing a benefit for the government. How does that feel to you?
I'm not sure I have I'm not sure I have an opinion on this right now. I'm not sure, to be honest. I just feel like the whole thing, it's just like there's a lot to talk through there. I think like I understand the attention. I see the misunderstanding really well translated by the media, by the way. And I kind of see like the core of what they desired for it to happen. But I only see this from my personal experience and recent healing with my family, of all people. I only see this as pushing down and putting pressure on something that is kind of clumsy. That was like maybe something that wasn't thought through, or maybe it was so difficult and entangled, but it was difficult to flesh it out in a way that felt completely good and solid. And the people of your country, they're going to push against this to make sure that this is something that is good for you. And I think that's what happened. I don't necessarily see this as a bad thing. I don't see this as a loss of a party either. Because what if they come back with something even better? You know what I mean? I would say before going into all the details, because obviously, like to be honest, like there are so many details that they're giving me a migraine. I would say that the whole of this for me is that it's like, all right, like you had opinions, we listened, it was voted down, and we'll come back with something better because we are in a society that loves to try new things, and it's different from same-sex marriage or giving a few days to the women when periods pain is too bad and things like that, which is like good, and they were really applauded for doing in the past few years. Family is a big deal. Family is one of the things that we have the most challenges with. Like the whole of our discussion was on this, by the way. So I just feel like there's a lot of compassion to have, and just like I would say it's good that they have tried. I think it was very clumsy. And I think the pushback is something of a strengthening for me. Hopefully, like they could say like, all right, we won't try again, but knowing how the party works and how it has worked in the past few years, how it has worked in the past few years, I would say it's more like a push up, like a push to strengthen your backbone and just like your leadership and the thought process behind this. But yeah, I don't know. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, to bring clarity is to bring responsibility to it. So I feel like the more clear they are on what the government assistance are, the more they're willing to take responsibility for what they have said and created.
I feel like the thing that the glitchy feeling is I'm not certain what the intention was in the first place. So, you know, if we and knowing what the intention was would then assist us in understanding if if that intention would have received greater support because it had pure intentions behind it or not. So, like, you know, it's unclear things hide unclear objectives. So we can't, it's difficult for me to form an opinion that it's either good or bad. I just feel like it's very muddy and there is clarity required. That's mostly what I feel about the situation. And I mean, as you said, they have a great track record of supporting the family and stuff like that. So I don't perceive ill intention. I would just like for the intention to be made clear.
Yeah, it's like exactly what I was saying about like I'm not sure I have an opinion on the including of like family and definition of love. Maybe it was done for legal purposes, but again, like just the feeling of trying to dig deep into it is giving me a migraine. So it's like maybe they do need to get clear first before we can ever have some sort of opinion on this. Yeah. Isaiah and Sage, like how do you Nadja, sorry, like I don't know if you wanted to say.
I do remember Sage mentioning in the worksheet that this could be politically motivating to create this law. Do you guys feel that way? Like it would be like a plus point for their political party just to get something out there, even if it's half-assed, you know?
Yeah, no, that's what I was feeling from it, like when I was feeling into it, is that maybe the political party or the coalition that's currently governing in Ireland wanted it to be like a big win because they made sure that the referendum vote took place on International Women's Day. And I don't know, maybe they just really wanted a big symbolic win. Like they were like, oh, we got these 2 amendments passed for women.
But they just put something out that wasn't fully thought through. And
yeah. And I think for them, maybe what would have been better is to just be like, you know what? Let's not care too much about the timing of this. Let's just really make sure that it's very thorough. And maybe they're because this is a kind of a complex topic, they didn't they had issues with reaching something that would have been acceptable to the people, so they just kind of put it out there. I'm not saying that I know that that's what happened, but I'm saying it maybe kind of feels that way, but I don't know.
Yeah. So maybe the media was kind of right in saying that it was a loss, a political loss. Obviously, like it wasn't the full picture. Maybe they focused a little bit too much on the political side, but might have been, yeah. And I think you're right. And I do remember like their legalization of abortion, if I remember correctly. I think it was one of the biggest wins in the world and one of the biggest celebration because it took times, like it took a few days to weeks to months. It was throat flu and social groups around the country were involved in it, like, you know. So yeah, I would say like trying to just put a stamp of approval on Women's Day as a date felt maybe kind of controlling. And yeah, again, I don't feel any ill intent. It's just like not well played, I think. Maybe I would say realtors as obviously I think they're American. I'm not sure. Is realtors American or is it from somewhere else?
Is what American?
Realtors. I'm not
Oh,
pronouncing it
Reuters.
well. Yeah.
The Reuters news. I don't know.
I'm not sure, honestly.
It sounds German. But
I think it's more European than American. I'm not certain about where in Europe, but I've always had the perception that Reuters was more
Scandinavian,
European.
maybe? I don't know. I don't remember actually. Danish? Well, I think what I would say was transpiring in some of the articles was the fact that culturally in their countries, because there were articles from several countries, that loss would have been the downfall of a political party. I would say maybe not necessarily in Ireland is my thought process. So maybe there was a little bit of projection of the local political view of how politics were just playing out for this one, because it would, and also because to be honest, like there were so many things voted down that it just seemed like such a big loss. I would say like we're taking the time to dissect it, but it does look like a big loss if you just look at it in a very superficial way.
And I also feel like it's all, one of those instances where you can't fail forward. You kind of need to get it right on launch. So the multiple iterations doesn't serve you under these circumstances, where in other instances you can kind of incrementally do something and refine the product as you go. This is not one of those situations.
well, you could, if I were in their position, I guess I would just what you would need to do would be just to be humble, just be like, oh yeah, you're right. There were some issues with this. We'll work on this going forward. And you could view it as, well, at least we're opening the national dialogue up about this, and yeah, maybe we didn't think through. We wanted to like get this victory, or something like that. But I don't know. So
I am glad it's bringing more discussion in Ireland so that there could be more clarity when it comes to organizing and developing this into a law.
Yeah, and I think that's why it doesn't feel like a full loss. It's
Mhm.
like we're clearly feeling like it can be an opening for more. And I would say, obviously, it doesn't warrant a big celebration like an obvious law, obvious win, like enshrining abortion in the Constitution. But I think in a way it's also like kind of that step forward that opens the way for more things to be taken into account. And I think overall this week there was like a big step forward for women's rights.
Mhm. And sorry, Sage, were you going to say something? Oh, okay. I do believe we have a little time because we started a little late for the top risk in geopolitical topic. If Granville would like to bring clarity to that.
So I do want to check in with everybody because I feel like that the top risks article in geopolitics is quite significant. Literally it covers 7 significant potential risks to the world right now, and the likelihood and impact of those risks. And each one of them could very easily be a full discussion on their own. So I just want to check, do we want to start this off just from the perspective of mentioning it with the pre-condition that we will continue the conversation next week, or would we rather like to initiate it next week because it's so big?
Well, I was kind of interested in naming the 7 risks. And I think maybe what we could do, if you guys agree, would be to bring either one of them where it feels necessary when we have the topics of the news that come up, because they're on things that we talk about very, very often. And so I think it would be more fun if we could like kind of compare them side to side with what is happening this week and what the professional, like the data scientists were saying about them. Do you want to do that? Would that be good?
Yeah, that feels good to me.
Yeah. So should we like present them just so that people know? It's kind of going to be a direction for like the next 9 months of what we're going to talk about. So I think it would be fun to just like tell people what are going to be our axes of reflection this year.
So high level, that the top, and they've highlighted 7, but and I suppose the list isn't exclusive, but these are the ones that are most likely to have an impact, and quite high impact. And not many of them are said to be unlikely to happen. So they will influence the landscape for the next 9 months, as Yurin shared. So one of the biggest ones was US-China trade relations, and how those bilateral relations may impact the levels of inflation across the globe, because technically they influence trade significantly across other countries. Also because the US has slowed down it has slowed down imports from China and are looking to incentivize potential local producers and things like that. They've also slowed down exports of technology components to China. Then there's also the Ukraine-Russia war, which will also have a quite significant impact, and specifically, it's had an exceptionally big impact on liquefied natural gas. So, and that's literally natural gas that's liquefied so that it can be transported, because it's less volatile than its gaseous form. But what has happened is that China has become a bigger user of liquefied natural gas from the US because of the reduction of supply from Russia. But Europe has also been significantly impacted by the sanctions on Russia, because that was one of the things that was applied in order to try and get Russia to get Russia and the Ukraine to come closer to some level of ceasefire. And the perception is that it's not likely to happen very quickly, or to happen very soon. And the impact is obviously going to be significant on inflation across Europe and across other energy supplies. Then there's also the energy risk factor, which is again related to that concept, but now it also looks at renewables. So because of a reduction in the availability of gas from Russia, there have been countries that have now turned on coal power stations again, where they were scheduled for decommissioning, They have stopped the decommissioning, and some of them have actually turned them on. So climate change becomes a whole nother caveat because of the political risk related to the war, because countries have to supply power to their population, and that just impacts the climate agenda, which everybody is a party to since the Paris Agreement in 2015, to say that we want to reduce the impact of all these emissions. We want to look at renewable energy. We want to ensure that the climate agenda is top of mind for many countries. And we have spoken about the number of protests in some countries related to the climate issues and the climate reforms that are expected of farmers in certain countries while they aren't able to keep up with inflation, while they aren't able to keep up with the demand for food, because again, all of those things have an impact on consumables, they have an impact on the movement of goods. So it becomes a significant thing. There's still a fallout around the COVID pandemic. Lots of economies have taken quite a long time to recover, and that recovery is very minimal. So there's a projection that we will start to see, well, a projected perception that we will only start to see a reduction in inflation rates in the second half of 2024, which means that households are literally functioning with tighter budgets, and the cost of certain goods going up so significantly also makes it a concern. And then there's also the consideration of all the destabilized relations amongst all these nations, with sanctions, with the US-China relations being strained. There's now a sense that there might be a lower level of international cooperation, so which could actually fuel deglobalization, because there's not as significant an amount of sharing of intelligence around things like producing semiconductors, technology parts, because all of those things are used in the advancement of weaponry and all sorts of other things. So there is a concern that there may actually be a shift towards deglobalization. And that shift towards deglobalization is also fueled by an increased incidence of cyber attacks. So as countries start to digitize all the infrastructures in terms of power, in terms of water, in terms of national intelligence systems, national security, and cyber attacks then becoming almost a very lucrative thing in order to gain information from what is meant to be secure systems, there is also a greater risk of less cooperation between countries, because they want to secure their national security and they want to secure themselves. They want to kind of de-risk in the global space. So there's many things. So I mentioned the climate risk, I've mentioned US-China relations. Then there's also still strong NATO-Russia direct conflict, a direct conflict perception because of the sanctions. So those relations are still continuing to be strained. The other thing is obviously around energy security, which I've mentioned, because while countries like the US are starting to incentivize renewables, it means that companies and people within the US are likely to invest more in the US as opposed to offshore, which also secured international trade. So international trade will also reduce as a result of that energy security play amongst many countries. So the things that are said to have the highest impact are the US-China relations, the cyber attacks, and the climate risk, where the COVID mutations and future pandemics, NATO-Russia conflicts, and deglobalizations have still a higher impact, but a lower likelihood. And then energy security, while having a higher likelihood, has a lower impact. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I agree with you, Yoreen, that the news will probably start to give us a sense of how thematically the news that's coming through aligns to those top risks that have been identified as top of mind for 2024.
Yeah, that would be interesting to dive into that. I think that the only big one that we haven't explored would be cyber attacks, so that's going to be something quite new. But for now, we have reached our hour, and yeah, I would say thank you to everyone that has watched this live. Thank you to Sarah for commenting and bringing to this very interesting discussion on women's rights and abortion. And thank you to everyone who's watched us on YouTube. If you enjoy this, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe so we can continue to make this discussion every week. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.